G'day everyone. Today we're joined by Rayna Fahey from Prosper Australia. We're going to chat about, the good times in Melbourne when we were rich and the hidden stories of what happened when we weren't. Lessons to be learned from, around the world, ways we could improve the wealth of Australia, how you can get involved, and why you need to. So, let's get going. Today we're here with Rayna Fahey from Prosper Australia. I'm excited as well, Peter. I think this might be the first time where we have the sound perfect, the video perfect.
Okay, no, it's all good.
Hopefully we won't jinx it. No. But anyway, Rayna, Prosper, we're going to have a few different grassroots political organisations on. But everyone's a fan, aren't they? Who doesn't love prosperity?
I don't know anyone.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Peter loves prosperity, but you see some of the monks, in the orange robes, they give up all their possessions, I guess.
But they still want to share the abundance of the earth with everyone.
Well, other people have intrinsic needs and where they derive their energy and wealth from, it isn't external. So it just depends what perspective you put on it.
Oh, I guess as well, we could look at, we might look at Venezuela and say, do they actually want prosperity? Do they actually enjoy it?
Well, that's quite a long bow there, right? How far do you want to get into Venezuela?
Oh, actually, Indonesia as well, if we have time for that. But
I think it very much depends on your definition of prosperity.
Exactly.
And it's one of the issues that Australia faces, or Western democracies face, is that the tools that we use to tell how well our economy is going count and don't count certain things. So how well we're doing depends on what we're counting.
It reminds me, there's that wellbeing index. New Zealand is using it, Bhutan.
Yep. And Australia has been moving towards it. The last federal term was very much a focus of Jim Chalmers, but seems to have quietly stopped recently, so I'm not quite sure what that's about.
Oh, stopped completely. Oh, okay.
Well, I don't think it's stopped, but it's just the momentum seems to have gone somewhere. Who knows where? So, we're hoping that continues to improve, because things like, there's a renewed focus from the government on things like productivity, but what we count as productive activity in our economy and what we don't count are really interesting. Things that we do count are, going to work and being paid and doing all those sorts of things, but what we don't count is having children and raising them. Yet if we stopped doing that, our economy would fall over quite hard. So we don't consider making the next generation of workers a part of production, which is a bit problematic.
Yeah, actually, one of the topics I was hoping to bring up with you is, all these countries around the world, they have different incentives for giving birth. Having children. You have to keep them.
I think 9 months is generally the gestation period. But beyond that, no incentive is really worth.
Oh, it's interesting. George Carlin, he says, while a woman is pregnant, we must protect the baby. The baby's sacred. As soon as you're born, fuck off. You can fend for yourself. And, they'll draft them in the war. They'll just...
And our economy actually treats having children as a lifestyle choice. It's counted as leisure activity. So when you're changing nappies and warming up bottles and teaching them to read and all those fun things, if you pay someone to do it, the economy counts it. But if you do it yourself, it doesn't count.
Yeah. But sorry, I was going to mention about the baby bonuses and things though. Because I guess
I landed right in the middle of all of that. It was great.
Oh,
every time we did something, the government threw some more money at us, and we're like, okay, thanks.
Oh, because how many kids do you have now?
I have 3, and I had 2 of them at once, so we got double everything.
Oh, yeah.
And we bought a house. They threw money at us for that. It was.
Oh, what? So parents can have an easier time buying a house than non-parents.
This was a little. No, we just happened to become parents at the same time that we bought a house. So just every couple of days we've got a check.
It's around the early 2000s. The baby bonus and so forth.
Well, I was explaining to my American housemate yesterday about the baby bonus and how, what was it? You'd get $1,000 per baby, was it?
I think so.
Yeah, and then you had family tax benefit Part A, Part B during that period as well. There's a few other little incentives.
But I'm not sure how much the media was hyping it up, but I heard stories of people especially younger couples would say like, oh, $1,000, let's have a baby. And then they would buy, big TVs.
Everyone takes the cash, always.
Oh yeah, you don't
Governments
say
don't.
no to it, but
Oh,
whether,
no, but like-
whether that was actually encouraging people to have children or not, I'm not entirely sure, because children are a lot more expensive than $1,000, especially once they become teenagers. So
Well, I mean, that's what we hope people would think. But
Yes.
it's curious, like studying through some of the economics literature, how often there are these scenarios where, something that mathematically makes sense, it doesn't play out like that in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Well, we don't have to look a lot further than their attempt to correct childcare. The idea was, put some childcare programs in place to allow, and again, we won't even talk about why people have to go, to both, let's say partners have to go and work. That's a different discussion. But the execution of it and how people manipulated that, and you had, the ABC childcare centres and so forth during that period.
Oh, yeah, that was
just corruption to the extreme.
That-
And then you got even Dutton and so forth, who
That's
made a
right.
killing from childcare. So
he doesn't like being known as, the childcare tycoon. He likes being
no one
known
really does. But again,
there's a lot of money being made in private
yeah.
childcare.
But my point is the execution of the intent to do the right thing often doesn't, land well.
It's what happened? The ABC childcare, it eventually went broke, didn't it? But it was like the main player.
In Victoria.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. But then actually that reminds me, isn't there some scandal going on at the moment in Australia? Because doesn't the government pay you a subsidy and then you go to whatever childcare provider you want? How's it work? I heard the costs keep blowing out because the government basically pays whatever the industry decides is going to be the price.
Yeah, Four Corners did a little expose about a month or two ago, which is quite good to watch.
Oh, okay. I'll have to check that out. Yeah. Anyway, but I was going to mention in terms of the, I guess, the economic policies, like they don't necessarily play out how they mathematically should. I guess one of the background reading things I was reading about, viewers might have heard of, I guess they probably haven't heard of Ricardian equivalence. There was this notion that if the government wants some extra money, one way of going about it is to increase taxes for everybody. And so then people will necessarily cut down on their spending. But another way of getting more income for the government is to borrow money. And so the Ricardian equivalence thing is like this sort of thought experiment where the people would know that the government's getting into all this debt to pay for the new trains or whatever. And so they would cut down their spending because they know that an increase in taxes is inevitable. But I guess, that's not how it plays out in the real world. People don't put as much thought into government policy. But I guess, I don't know, Rayna,
tax does really drive behaviour though. So it's not necessarily individuals, but investment decisions get made a lot around where the government's putting taxation, which is a lot of what we talk about, because we want to see taxation shifted off work and productive activity and onto land and scarce resources and onto monopoly effectively. So when you have a monopoly, the value is created by the demand for it, not by how much it costs to produce it. So that is what we call a socially created value. So we want to tax that rather than taxing people who are making stuff. So we say a nice little slogan is tax what you take, not what you make. So we're trying to use our economy to encourage people to be building and making and creating and innovating and inventing and all of those kinds of things. And if you do, then keep what you make out of that.
I'll bet a practical example or application.
Well, a practical example is going to work. We pay an enormous amount in income taxes. We're a very, very income tax heavy country, but we don't tax things like land and resources very heavily at all. Resources is
what you take, what you take from the commons.
You take from the commons, yeah.
Yeah, I see.
Are you talking about the mining companies, what they take?
Yeah, sure. Anything that's owned collectively by us or value is given collectively by us. So if you have a block of land here, the value of the land itself is derived from the community around it, not by it just as an empty block. So if you have an empty block in Brunswick, it's worth a hell of a lot more than an empty block in the middle of South Australia, for example. So that value is created by all of us, not by the person that owns it. If you put a building on top of it, great. But we tax the buildings, but not the land. Whereas it should be the other way around. Because that encourages people to be really productive with the land in which they own.
I guess it's worth noting Henry George popularized this idea. I guess, was it his own idea, I wonder?
Not entirely, but he was a journalist. He was a fantastic communicator, and his ability to write in a way that was really accessible to audiences and to speak. He toured all over the place. He toured Australia. It was his honeymoon, actually. He married an Australian woman. And that must have been a fun honeymoon for her.
I guess you know what you're getting yourself into.
you do. I think she was very, very aware of the sort of man that she had married. Yes, he wrote a book called Progress and Poverty, which because he'd been observing what was happening in San Francisco during the gold rush, that all this wealth was being created. Like all of a sudden, everyone's really rich, but there was also this massive increase in poverty and what was going on. And he spent some time really sort of looking and exploring that. And he went, that is because we're not taxing the value collection on land prices. And we saw the same thing here. Melbourne was quite an incredible example. We had enormous amounts of wealth coming through Melbourne because of the gold fields. And the story, it was also a significantly less regulated economy. So the stories of how much wealth was coming through Melbourne, and people just they had so much money they didn't even know what to do with it. So it was just sort of buy, and everyone's buying off each other, and the price of land just went through the roof. And we kind of glorify that time. We go, oh, look at Collins Street and all these beautiful buildings.
You see this glimpse into the past, all these gorgeous buildings down there.
What we don't talk about is what happened next, which was 3 years after a lot of these buildings got built. There was a massive collapse. And the poverty and devastation in Melbourne was horrendous. There was literally people's jobs to go around each morning and pick up all the dead babies out of the gutters.
Oh, wow.
Because people just abandoned them because they couldn't afford to feed them. And that's a part of Melbourne's story that we don't tell very often, because there was no real regulation and control over the way that land price was being let to run free. So the politicians all happened to also be the bankers and the real estate people. Like, they were all the same people. So they created this amazing pyramid scheme for each other, and then it all kind of went to shit.
There's no doubt, like, Australia has invested far too much in land, in property in particular, and the banks obviously thus, grossly, sickeningly profiteering off it here. Who would be liable, for instance, in, let's say, this block of land? So who would be liable for the tax?
Oh, the owner of the land.
Oh, well, I guess like the owner of each apartment,
assuming that, this I'm assuming this is all sort of freehold title throughout the block.
Like each apartment owner, But it actually reminds me, there was something interesting. When I visited the Prosper Australia office, there was something posted up in the bathroom. There's a myth that you should be buying property, that somehow it's always best to rent. Am I remembering this correctly?
I don't go into that bathroom.
Oh, I guess.
I don't know what you're
Do they have
to.
I see. They're pitching different ideas to men versus women in the Prosper Australia.
Yeah, we've just got a nice picture of Hardware Lane. I'm going to have to go and do some investigating.
Is it all related to property, the manifesto? Because I'll play ignorance here. I'm discovering it here.
When we use the term rent, we're talking about what's called economic rent, which is slightly different to the way that normal everyday people think about rent, because economic rent is the value that's created above the price of production. When we talk about rent seeking, we talk about people who are buying a thing, holding onto it, and then being able to sell it for a higher price later on. That difference, because there's no production involved, that's called rent. So we say you should tax that, because that value is not created by anything that anyone's done. it's they're just held on to it.
speculation.
Don't they
Yeah.
call that also like capital gains in the
Yes,
tax system?
yeah, that's a really good example. So capital gains is actually generally land gains,
Yeah.
but we call it capital gains, that is a huge example, because if you buy a piece of land, like for example, we bought, when we first bought a house in the western suburbs for $230,000, and then we sold it 10 years later for $730,000, and we hadn't done that. We hadn't created that value. In fact, everything that we did on our property, and we did a lot. We were in Gardening Australia.
Oh, okay, wow.
We did a lot on that property.
You still live? Oh, you've sold it.
No,
Okay,
we've
sorry.
sold that now. But that actually, all the work that we did on that property devalued the property, because it meant that when we sold it to a developer, it made the demolition more expensive. So,
Oh, wow.
we actually were able to quantify
Oh, wow.
how much it meant to our market price, because the neighbouring block sort of oversold exactly the same property the week before us for $40,000 more, because they didn't have to worry about all those demolition costs.
But it would be the demand of where that property was.
That $500,000 of increased value was not created by us. That was created by the demand of the community, right? So why do we get that?
Oh, to be fair, creating a nice garden is, I would say, something that actually does contribute to the
100%,
community.
but it's not $500,000, is it? Yeah. Why do we get to keep that when someone who is living next door and is going to work and is paying all their taxes and doing all the things, they don't get that for free. In fact, if you're renting, you end up paying tax twice, because you pay tax at your work and then you come home and then you pay rent to your landlord, who gets the advantages of the taxpayer-funded infrastructure around that property.
But can you actually decompartmentalize just one component of the tax system? Because what I'm hearing now is just you're singling out just property out of the whole tax system, and saying that was, say, an inequitable way of taxing someone because of that capital gain in that property, but it's maybe not fair based on that other people are paying income tax. So to just take the property increase out of the tax system on its own, how do you just do that?
That's a really good question, because it's obviously not a lot more complicated than that. And we have in Australia state taxes, local taxes, federal taxes. They are all like, it's a giant mess. And we have too many taxes in Australia. That's part of the problem that we have, is that if you
consumption tax or GST,
if you are wealthy enough to have a really good accountant, you can weave your way through all this and get away from a lot of taxes. But normal working people generally can't, because they're only facing one tax. So part of our argument is actually one of the reasons why you should tax land and not work is because it simplifies the tax system significantly, which again lowers the overall burden on society, which will make us better, or better off, I should say. No, it's not that simple. And one of the exciting things that's going on at the moment, exciting to some of us, is that we have a federal government who's really interested in looking at and open to look at tax reform, because tax reform is, I call it the Titanic of political change. It doesn't happen very often, and it's very, very slow, and you need to have everybody working together, otherwise it just like runs into an iceberg. So what we really need is, because economists and business and the community sector, everyone's been saying for a really long time we need tax reform, but it's so politically difficult that you need to have the right political conditions, which we do now. So what we want now is this government to lead a process of conversation, which they have started to do, where we put all the taxes on the table and go, what's working, what's not working, how do we shift it? And we need to come up with quite a long process of reform, because you can't just do this stuff overnight. People starve and die. That's generally what happens. Businesses fall over and everything's kind of quite terrible. You do need to do things slowly. For example, in South Australia, the ACT, where they've been doing a stamp duty to land tax transition, it's like a 30-year project. And that's what we are looking at federally. But there's simple things that you can do, and there's complex things that you can do. And the federal government needs to play a really strong leadership role in helping steer the whole country through that process. Because again, you need to have federal taxes and state taxes and local government council rates all in the mix.
Could I just make there's one point I made earlier which I didn't sort of flesh out when you were talking about the land that is ours and to tax that. And I wanted to bring it back to the mining industry, because it does belong to us.
Yes.
And we have,
and we give it away.
Literally give it away. So that is the biggest, quickest win. Because to make the changes that you're implying here, that's like, Labor went to the election a few elections ago and said, we're going to grandfather capital gains, and they lost the election on that. So to make even these incremental changes, and yes, there might be some political will now. I suspect what they'll do is probably increase to some extent the consumption tax, the GST, to make some other things, which is not a federal tax. They manage it for the states.
Yep.
So that will be part of the negotiations, I'm sure, as well. But until they actually reform what we have here, which is our resources, I don't think any of the rest is ever going to get tinkered. That's
it seems like a quick win, yeah. But actually, Rayna, can you elaborate? You have ideas for how Australia should reform its tax system, and I remember as well Jim Chalmers sort of putting the call out that he's open to tax changes. But can you elaborate on like how Prosper actually goes about advocating for this stuff? Sure. What it means to be a member of Prosper?
Yeah, and everyone can be involved now. It's very exciting because the Treasury sent out their email on Friday saying, here is the consultation documents, everyone have your say. And then
great, yeah.
and Jim Chalmers has said, we want to hear from all of the different organisations and we want to know your opinions, we want your ideas on the table. And I would say just to everyday people, also make a submission, tell them what you want. And you don't need to be an economist to do that. You just say, I want an economy that does A, B, and C. I want a clean environment. I want a good future for my kids. I want publicly owned resources and utilities, whatever. What are the things that you care about? Tell the government because they need to hear it. So in terms of what Prosper's doing, we will be making a submission to the it's called the Roundtable, which is going to be about 25 different people representing quite large organisations of industry and community groups. So we'll put forward a submission for that, and we're encouraging our members to do so as well. I'm hoping that we're going to put together a submission guide. But this is sort of the beginning of the process. We're hoping there'll be many other consultation points along the way. It's not even the first. There's been some Productivity Commission stuff before now, but we're excited. We've been talking about this for 130 years, and we have had some really good wins in our history, but it's been a while that we've had any kind of large scale reform. We've seen lots of little wins, particularly in Victoria. Victoria has had some really great tax reforms over the last 10 years, which are starting to really play out in our market. And we regularly see stories of the investors freaking out about how terrible it is in Victoria, but we're actually the best state to be a first home buyer now in the country, and that's great.
I guess it's worth mentioning to viewers outside Victoria. There's the land tax here, but it's only for, it doesn't count for your primary place of residence. No. So not quite what Henry George envisioned.
No, but getting there. We also have rezoning windfall gains tax, which is really important, which means that when the government decides to rezone your property and it increases the value, that value is taxed, that increase. Because that's, again, a socially creative value. The government says instead of being able to build 2 stories, you can now build 10 stories. That means your property's worth a lot more. Yeah. Even if you don't develop that, it's still worth a lot more. So in that increase, a part of that goes back to the government. We did a report about Fisherman's Bend, and I'm sorry I can't give you the numbers because it was a while ago, but it was like hundreds of millions of dollars was given away in land value from the government because they didn't have any rezoning legislation in there. So that legislation's come into place since then. Our biggest problem with it is that it doesn't include residential to residential rezoning. So it's a little bit technical.
Like extra floors, perhaps.
Yeah. So if you go from one state of density to another state of density, that's excluded from that legislation. So the legislation deals with things like farming to residential or industrial to residential. So those are important, absolutely. But the residential to residential exclusion means that, like recently, the government announced what they called these new activity centres around some of the train stations.
Yeah.
So you can go from 2 stories to 20 stories, and that if you owned land there, you'd be like, yay!
Because you get it for free, yeah.
Yeah, because the government just said, hey, your land's now heaps more valuable, and you didn't do anything for that, and we're not going to take any of it. So enjoy. That's not really that fair. because the objective of policy should be to make policy reform equitable, and having massive winners out of situations like that's not so great. The other piece of legislation that we have in Victoria, which is a result of our work, is the vacant residential land tax. So that means that if your property has been empty for a period of time, that you pay a percentage to the government to say, sorry, we're slack.
You're saying you like this? And
yeah, we do. Well, yes, asterisk. We don't think it's an ideal tax, but it's better than nothing. So our research, we do a research report called the Speculative Vacancies Report, and that looks at how many empty homes or empty or underused homes there are in metropolitan Melbourne, and we use water use as a way of judging that. So if there's no water being used as a property, we can pretty much guess no one lives there.
Oh, so it was Prosper Australia who was figuring out which houses are empty.
Yeah, and so because the government should be able to tell us that, like how.
Oh, I guess my biggest concern with this law is it creates this incentive to create a simulation. All these people, pretending that someone's living in the home. They put on timers for the lights, they put on timers for the water.
Sure, some people might go about that, but generally what it's going to do is encourage people to use their land a bit better. It's going to make people go, I have to pay a tax now. Oh, well, maybe I should rent it out, or maybe I should develop it, or maybe I should do something, because the tax is also, it stacks up over time.
What about, is that being applied, to like developers who don't release apartments and so forth?
Absolutely. And that's another piece of research that we've done, is looking at what we call staged releases. When you look at apartment buildings or greenfield developments, you'll quite often see stage 1 now selling, stage 2 now selling, because what they do is actually they drip feed the properties onto the market to make sure that the prices stay high. And we did some research where we tracked 9 master planned communities across different parts of Australia, and we tracked the sales volumes against the market price. And when the market price was coming down, they slowed down putting stuff up for sale. But as soon as the market price went back up again, they're like, oh, quick, let's sell lots, which...
It's manipulating.
It's manipulating the market. And when the developers are telling the government that the only way to solve the housing affordability crisis is to let them build more stuff, well, fine. But you've got to release it to the market. Yeah, let the market decide.
In terms of the vacant homes and like the drip feeding of stock, I guess I don't know if I mentioned on a previous episode, but I was the main author of Fusion's housing policy. I was advocating for full land tax like Henry George proposed, because I guess like then it would sort out, I guess, like this vacant, the vacant properties. If you were paying heavy tax on using that land, then I guess you have to actually use it to get your money's worth. It's about encouraging best use. Yeah. So the problem that we've got in Victoria is that we do have kind of like a land tax, but we call it rates. So your government rates effectively acts as that tax. But the problem that we have is that it's capital improved value, which means that the more you develop the property, the higher your taxes are. So people who put 20-story apartment buildings on a block are effectively subsidising the empty block next door. And so, yes, if we consolidated land taxes and rates all into one thing and made it land values only, that would be fantastic. Yeah. Actually, was it, we had someone recently locally, they were talking about, it might have been Angelica. Sorry if I'm misattributing this policy, but you see lots of people saying like developers should basically pay for extra green space and
appropriated to the rights.
Yeah.
So even councils don't misappropriate that money.
Oh yeah, Nancy was saying this. Yeah, there was that's right. There was some tax. The developers were meant to be paying for the like extra green space locally, but actually councils were just using it wherever. But I actually like the idea. I should have mentioned in that previous episode, I was a bit critical of like, is there enough parks already in Brunswick?
Yeah, you would say concrete more Europe.
I guess it's probably worth mentioning to the viewers. I actually used to live in New York for 5 years, so I'm not used to being surrounded by parks. But I like
the green things outside are called trees.
But I like the notion of like one big park that you actually want to go to, as opposed to like a park on every corner that's just good for like a place for the dog to poop. Anyway, I think getting a bit sidetracked here. Sorry. Actually, before we forget, Rayna, every episode I like to have a bit of a game. We have a political quote. Everyone guesses the quote. Did you have one prepared, by the way?
Oh, I do.
Oh, okay, great.
I don't know how like fun I was supposed to be.
Oh, well,
So my quote's a little bit nerdy.
this is something that the viewers might guess as well. But yeah, if you'd like to go ahead. I mean,
Well, going back to our conversation earlier, my quote is that rent is the secret tax the wealthy charge the poor.
Rent is a secret tax the wealthy. Oh yeah, makes sense. Yeah, because I guess the wealthy have all the land and that. I guess I'm imagining this probably came about during the time of like the 1860s and all that, with all the US industrialists.
No, it's a bit more recent than that.
I guess maybe.
I'll give you a clue. The person is still alive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Geez, I'll just say Paul Keating just for the hell of it.
I reckon I'm going to guess Scott Santon's. He's a big proponent of universal basic income.
Yeah, no, he'd like that. Actually, it was Joseph Stiglitz.
Oh, the Nobel laureate. Yeah.
Who was recently here. I didn't get to
that's
see
right.
It, but,
Yeah. He's I should check out. Did he write The Path to Freedom? Or The Road to Freedom?
Yes.
Yeah, based on The Road to Ruin. I should check out. It reminds me. One of the benefits of being in Prosper. You were saying there's
library.
There's a big library,
Yeah.
isn't there?
We have this amazing library, which I am trying really hard to get everyone excited about. But we were left an economics library by a member a while ago, and
with the whole collection. Oh, okay.
A chunk of books, and that became the basis of what we call the Halkyd Library, and we've continued to add to it, and people donate to it all the time. So if you're a member of Prosper, you can borrow books from it for free whenever you want, and we have Progress and Poverty in about 10 different languages and various different editions. Every Henry George book.
Progress and Poverty. That was Joseph Stiglitz.
No, that was Henry George's book.
Oh, okay.
But we have hundreds of titles, and we continue to add to it. So anytime anyone writes anything that's focused on the role that economic rents play in our economy, we generally snaffle a copy and put it in there. So
because I guess it's worth mentioning as well. So I gather Prosper Australia, like we were saying before, like why should anyone join in that?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess like all the membership fees help pay like full-time research staff, don't they?
Yeah. So our members primarily support our advocacy work. Because of the way that charity law works badly in Australia, we have two organisations. We have a research institute and then Prosper Australia. And the research institute is where if people make donations to us, tax deductible donations, that funds our research, but that is only allowed to do that. And so our members support Prosper Australia, and we do advocacy and education and talking on podcasts and anything that we can do to help spread the word. So one of the things that our members get is access to the library, but also get free access to our events, of which we are now starting to really get them going again after COVID made us all stay at home and do things online. We're getting them back in person again, which is exciting and fun. We've got more stuff coming up for members. We've just been going through quite a cool process of assessing what we do for our members and our supporters and going, what else could we do? Because we want to make it fun and engaging.
I guess I should mention going to one of these events is how I met Rayna, actually. And meeting many like-minded people. I think, actually. Well, I guess anyone who didn't, who wasn't a fan of fusion didn't tell me to my face.
I'm sure everyone there. Actually, it was quite fun because when we put out our scorecard, we had a few people going, "Who is this fusion?" I was like, "Go and look at their website," and it's like, "Oh, they're actually quite good." The best way to stay in touch is through. We have an e-news that people can sign up for. There's not many emails that we send out a year. We don't send one out every week or anything like that. We do social media, but as little as I have to because I don't really like it very much.
Fair enough.
I've been online in that world since it started, and it's just it's got a bit gross these days. So I try and avoid it as much as I can. But email is is fun, and I'm always happy to chat to people on the phone.
Yeah. So
What's your quote?
I'll do my quote. So my quote is the quote is if you complain, you're playing the victim, but if you don't complain, you are the victim. This was an Australian politician in the last 40 years. All Australians will have heard of this person. Yeah. A former Prime Minister.
Is it Kevin Rudd?
No.
No?
Close.
Yeah. Gillard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why
Why did I guess that? Yeah.
It was interesting. I was chatting with my housemate last night about this podcast, and I mentioned before she's American, so I was filling her in about Julie Gillard. She was a big fan. We watched the misogyny speech.
Oh yeah.
But also, I was tempted. There was a similar quote. I guess in terms of people being victims, I see it as a big reason for creating the podcast now. I want to make it relatable to people how easy it is to get involved in a political organization. Make sure that you have rights, that society keeps improving. To Julia Gillard's point, people sort of demonize you for complaining, but if you don't, there's a common view, especially amongst the residents of this building. We had a meeting last night. A common view seemed to be if we just sort of tune out of any sort of political discussion here, then sort of she'll be right, everything will be fine. No, it won't. If you tune out, you'll get oppressed.
Well, I'll say it's one step further. You're actually complicit in whatever happens.
Actually, that's a good way of putting it.
No, it's sort of, that is what happens. It's like I always say, I've said it many times in our discussions, you get the government you deserve.
Absolutely. I'm really lucky. I got involved in politics at a really young age, and it was at a time where I think it was a bit easier. The realities weren't so harrowing. I think when I started getting involved in politics, it wasn't quite so existential. I mean, it didn't seem as existential as it is now. But I just think it just behoves us to make sure that our society is as kind as it can be. And I'm lucky I come from New Zealand. It's a wonderful place to live and grow up. And we've just recently had a Prime Minister who made that acceptable, that we have a politics of kindness, which is Jacinda Ardern. And same age as me, we sort of cut our teeth politically at the same time. So it's quite interesting to see how her career has gone. And I'm so grateful for her for creating that space within politics, because we have this sort of idea that politics has to be arguments and rough, and it's all about standing up the front and yelling and having the best opinion. And actually, when I think about political leadership, I think about grandmothers and community. I think of the best leader I know in my community, who is an older woman who is retired, and she makes sure that no family goes hungry, and if anyone needs anything, she's got the person to call. And that's the sort of leadership that I want. And
leading with compassion instead of through threats.
And we should have a politics that held space for that. And at the moment, we don't really. It's parliamentary politics and electoral politics is incredibly hard to get into if you are not an able-bodied white man. And I think we should try and change that. We should push back against that. And it is absolutely changing. It's fantastic to see the diversity of representation that's starting to happen in the Australian Parliament. But still, I think we've got a real issue around economic privilege in our Parliament. And we look at the number of parliamentarians who own multiple houses having conversations about housing affordability and economic reform when they have such a vested interest in the status quo. It can be a bit problematic sometimes.
Isn't a lot of that simply because running for, especially in the Liberal Party, I've heard that the pre-selection process involves basically wining and dining all the power brokers. And so that's why it ends up being a boys' club, and it skews towards male people being pre-selected. But also that culture sort of favors wealth. And so, is it, I guess you characterize the political members as property owners. I would say that primarily they're wealthy, and that there are tax incentives.
No, to me, it goes back. What is their policy? What are they trying to advocate? Who are they advocating for? First and foremost, I think it's always about follow the money. I think you're actually speaking about them as individuals who are going there, and then what are they gaining from that themselves?
I mean,
and we spoke about that last episode about the corruption that they have a particular portfolio, and then they go. As soon as they leave politics, they set themselves up for work in that particular space. Working for military companies, etc. ScoMo and Christopher Pine, etc. And we can go through the whole list. I think that's irrelevant as in the individuals and what motivated them to get into politics. I think they're two different discussions, and whether they want to be part of the LNP, Nationals, or whatever.
Yeah,
it's the, let's call it the framework that we have in place that allows individuals to almost Orwellian corrupt themselves to the extreme, and we facilitate that. We don't change anything, and we say, oh well. And even I said it last time as well. Christopher Pine, when he was asked why do you think it's okay to go from having a military defense portfolio to that, he says, "If I'm allowed to, if you change it, then I wouldn't."
Yeah. Absolutely, and I mean, we have to acknowledge that the electoral system that we've inherited is based on the landlords. If you own the land, then you get to be the government, and we're moving away from that, but very, very slowly. And things like transparent donation laws, proper public funding of political campaigns.
You just have to look at the water situation in New South Wales. We've got Barnaby and
that's right, yeah,
like millions and millions of dollars. They should be in jail right now.
Absolutely, yeah,
in jail.
But these people in remote New South Wales, why do they keep electing Barnaby Joyce? Absolute disgrace. This is the best they can choose. This is after he passed out drunk on the flower.
Forget that. That's irrelevant. They've done buyout of water, and it's tens of millions of dollars. And it's just like, I've set up an account in the Cayman Islands, but it's arm's length. Why have you set it up? Out.
New England, that's it.
Out.
And everyone in New England is betraying Australia.
One of our executive committee members. I will be sure to let her know. But I mean, it's definitely an issue, I think, in Australia about civics education, because far too few people actually understand how our democracy works.
Unfortunately,
and it's not taught in schools. So people get to election day, don't know what any of it means, generally vote on name recognition or family history, or they just like the name. Oh, someone's got the same name as me, so I'll vote for them. Like, it's quite astounding how people make their voting decisions. But generally, the vast majority of the voting public don't make it based on a proper considered policy analysis.
I guess it's worth noting to viewers as well, like the current system, like with its bias towards incumbents, they obviously love the idea for you to tune out. They love anything that makes it harder to uncover new parties. They love the view that, you basically shouldn't talk politics, that it should all be avoided. Yeah.
It goes back to your point. I know you mentioned before about even like here in our building, and, you cop some grief about having a little poster at some point, when the campaign period. It's like, you want people at the grassroots to not be ignorant. And it's all, even in this building, it was like, no, you need to take that down.
I was trying to explain to these people, we'll have more rights.
Yeah.
They were saying, what if everybody, the guy's asking me, like, what if everybody put up one of these posters?
Yes.
And I said, great, we'll have more rights.
Yeah.
And that clearly wasn't the answer he was hoping for.
Well, I was going to say, that's why I wrote, I said, okay, then shall we take down the Aboriginal Indigenous painting on that wall there? Because, I could be offended right now.
Yeah.
It's like, at what point is your stupidity is going to infect me now?
A fair point, yeah. But actually, I wanted to get back, so we were talking about, being stepped on and all this before. One of the quotes, I was going to have it for the game, but nobody would have got it because it was a historian. But the quote was, right, as the world goes, is only in question between equals in power, while the strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. Here, this was a historian, I didn't write his name down, Thucydides, I think his name was. He was talking about the Peloponnesian Wars and Athens basically stomping on everybody else because they could. Yeah. And so, I mean, there was a comparison that, like, right now the US is doing the same, sort of breaking its own rules. And
well, you just had to watch. I don't know if you saw Insiders the other day. Penny Wong and everyone else just stumbling on their words, trying to in one breath saying, the rule of law, and then asking about the other aspect of what's going on, and it's just forget about the rule of law, and it's just they just use it's double talk at the moment. It's sickening.
But then, so Rayna, on your point of, I guess, like Jacinta Ardern, ruling with compassion. I mean, why I brought up this is because, yes, it's nice to have more compassion in society, but I guess don't we as well need to be mindful that, we're always on the verge of being stepped on. We always have to be involved in politics. We can never take the leadership for granted to be acting in our best interests, can we?
I mean, I think a good, healthy sense of skepticism is good for everybody. But we get the politics that we vote for. So if we continue to vote people in who are nasty and name calling and all of that kind of stuff, and also if we can continue to consume the media that encourages that. I was very privileged that I got to spend some time working in a parliament and seeing behind, from the inside out, looking out, how the media, what they choose to report as to what's going on in parliament. And it is all about the conflict. That's what they sell. It's not what's happening.
No.
It's
and they need the soundbite, that gotcha moment.
Yeah. It's all about question time and who's going to say this funny thing and this nasty thing, and it sets up our politics to be really combative. But actually, when we go and look at select committees where most of the work gets done, they're generally all kind of quite nice to each other and work together really hard to get the best outcome. And there's some fantastic stories that never get told. And it's, I think the onus is on us as consumers to push our media to be better. And it's really interesting this week to see the stuff that's been happening with Antoinette Lattouf and how that's actually put it back on our national broadcaster to say, what is your role in public interest journalism? And I'm quite good friends with a number of ABC journalists, and I'm really happy for them that this case turned out like that, because it's going to make the management of our national broadcaster, which we pay for. We pay to have strong independent public interest journalism, and if they are not fearlessly backing up their journalists, then we can't rely on them.
We need more grassroots media.
And we need more grassroots independent media, and we need to vote for that with our eyes and our ears. The attention economy is it's gross.
It's tough, yeah.
I really think that the decision in the federal court on that case is a bit of a precedent across the board. That, sure, the upper management, media at the high end, they can push a particular tone, but at the grassroots level, it doesn't represent what most people generally would think. And we have to get more active and vocal on what we think.
And what we want is proper rules and proper processes.
Governance and
good governance. Right. And we want that in our organisations, we want that in our governments, we want that in our communities. And I think we are very much suffering from a lack of that. So the more we can stand up and say, actually, those things are really important to us. We want process. We want Israel and Palestine to be facing the same set of rules. No,
it doesn't seem like too much to ask for, but unfortunately it's very tough. Yeah,
and it's heartbreaking. As I'm a person who grew up sort of in the shadow of the 60s generation, and then before that, the stopping fascism in Europe, and these things all just seem to make common sense, and it's kind of a bit harrowing that we seem to have forgotten a lot of these lessons of history. But thinking if enough of us can stand up and say, actually.
Yeah, you're right. It's almost like we were born with a particular moral code that was given to us, right, throughout history.
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, we're going to let an algorithm decide what your moral code is going forward.
Yeah.
So I guess, Rayna, the moral of the story, join Prosper if you want prosperity for Australia.
Yes.
And that the major parties don't like to pursue the major economic changes that we actually need. Can you say that?
Hopefully, no. I'm a relentless optimist, and I think this term actually we're going to see some really great conversations, because both major parties have said that they're here for the debate.
Which one's the second major party?
The limping Liberal Party. But I mean, again, they've said, we're open to it. We just don't want to see taxes go up. And I'm like, great, neither do I. I want to see them shifted.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm happy to see taxes go down.
What's that saying?
Shift them.
If we if we pay the wrong tax, then we pay more tax. Am I
Absolutely, yeah. And that's such an important thing for people to understand. And I think we so much, particularly sort of in the social justice and environmental justice space, we focus on the problems and how to fix them, but we don't necessarily focus enough on how much our economic system is creating those problems to start with.
Yeah, root cause of everything.
And strike the root.
Okay. Thanks, Rayna.
Pleasure.
Okay, I guess we can't talk all day, but thanks for joining us, everyone. Thanks, Rayna.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.